Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for part 3 of the Q&A, so let's go ahead and knock this out. Alright, first question. Oh, let me get my hat on first. Can't forget the hat. Most important part. Hey Jason, I'm 19 and I'm taking taekwondo. I lift 3 days a week and the TKD 3 days a week. Using your program, and I'm wondering if this is too much workload. Alright, usually when people say my program, I'm going to assume you mean the novice 5x5. This one's going to be hard to say. Generally, people who are doing the novice 5x5 are people with perfect lifestyles who have plenty of recovery ability. They're not doing other sports or anything. The fact that you're doing another sport, my novice 5x5 might be a bit too aggressive. So what I would ask you is, what are your training goals? Are you training to be a better athlete? Or are you training to get bigger, like you're training for hypertrophy? Because my novice 5x5 is really a hypertrophy first, strength is a close second type program. So it's muscle and then strength. So it's like, it's 10 out of 10 muscle mass, 9 out of 10 strength for a novice. So if your goal is to just get better performance though all around and still be able to recover from large amounts of taekwondo, if the recovery of the program becomes too big of a problem for you, I'm going to say that maybe you need to go run something like starting strength, which is again intended for field athlete, contact sport athletes. So starting strength 3 days a week plus your TKD 3 times a week might be a slightly better choice if your goals are just performance related. On the other hand, if you're just trying to get bigger, my linear hypertrophy program might be the better choice. You could run my linear hypertrophy program to put on size and quite a bit of strength with it, but size being your primary concern. You could do that and then do your taekwondo on the off days and you'll probably recover better. But you know, if you're able to run my novice program, my novice 5x5, and recover from it and still not negatively affect your taekwondo and everything flows together, if you just happen to be one of those people who can handle all the workload, then by all means continue to do it that way if that's what you enjoy. But if recovery becomes a problem, I'm going to push you in the direction of one of those other 2 programs. All right, next question. Hello, Jason. I'm a 35-year-old male with not so much serious lifting experience. I consider myself as a novice, and I would like to start with your novice program. Given that I am 35, I think it's unimaginable that for me the program might be hard to recover from. To make it manageable, would you suggest a cut on volume and run a cutting version of it, or just slower progression rate, adding smaller weight increments at the time, and not try to increase weight every workout, but every second or third? Thanks a lot. All right, brother. Actually, what you described for the cutting version, that is the progression. You cut the progression rate in half on the cutting version. As far as that goes, you know what, I can't tell because I don't know how you're doing at 35. If you're 35 years old and you're on TRT, or your testosterone levels are good, your health is really good, you're not suffering any noticeable negative health effects from aging so far, you might be able to handle the regular program. But the thing is, there's a lot of 20-year-old kids who can't handle the program. So you could weigh it all out. What I would say to most people, though, if recovery from the novice program is a concern, the 5x5, my linear hypertrophy program, is written specifically for people whose lifestyles or life circumstances don't allow them to fully recover from the novice 5x5. That it's a perfectly viable alternative for people who can't handle the recovery. The cutting version was really intended for people who still want to run the flavor of that program, who want a recomposition or who are obese and they want to lose weight while gaining muscle mass. That's what the cutting version was written for. It wasn't necessarily written for people who struggle just on the recovery end. I wrote a separate program for that called the Linear Hypertrophy Program, which is in my programs playlist. But you know, it's up to you to decide what you want to do depending upon your health, your lifestyle, everything else. You might be able to run the normal version. Honestly, even at 35, it just depends. Depends on what your hormone levels, recovery levels, and everything look like. All right, next question. Hey Jason, you recently did a video about a young man who died while bench pressing. For many of us, getting 3 good spotters to be able to use a power rack isn't always an option. The gym I go to only has 1 power rack and it is frequently in use. Are there any other options to safely bench press heavy by yourself? And if you don't have 3 trained spotters or a power rack, should you simply bench press lighter, or use a different exercise to build your chest? Would chest presses with dumbbells be safer? They stimulate similar growth and strength to the bench press? Thanks. Honestly, brother, what I recommend to guys who safety is an issue there, don't even bother with the dumbbells. If you're wanting to get something that's going to carry over perfectly to your bench press, do the floor press. Floor press with a pause on the floor. Sometimes you only need one spotter to help you. If you've got a rack you can get on the side of and do it that way, you can totally do it that way. Some guys do it off of blocks. You have options available there. But failing that, sometimes you can get over there even with blocks, set up little blocks or plates to start it on, and have one spotter help move the weight over and hand it to you. It shouldn't be too hard to find a spotter who's strong enough to help you with the floor press, because odds are you're not going to be doing a tremendous amount of weight. You got to remember they're just there to help you, because the beauty of the floor press, it can't fall and hit you. Because even if you're a big guy, at most it's going to touch your chest. For me, the floor press will touch my chest, but it can't hit me in the neck. It's the plates will stop it if you're using full-size plates. So the floor press is going to be your best alternative, and the floor press has direct carryover to your bench press strength. It is one of the best bench press accessories out there for someone who wants to improve their raw paused bench. So there's no reason you can't use the floor press as a replacement for the bench press when you can't do the bench press safely in your gym with the equipment you have available. And you have to remember, the floor press is the forerunner of the bench press. All right, the floor press was the original exercise. The bench press came later as a replacement for the floor press when benches were actually made. All right, next question. Jason, I do a 4-day-a-week upper-lower split. Can you discuss how to structure a training program that includes squats, deadlifts, and death jumps? More specifically, should an athlete be squatting in or deadlifting before death jumps, vice versa? Does it matter? It's going to depend on the sort of training stimulus and training load you're using. If you're going to do depth jumps, you've got to remember that's an explosive exercise. I wouldn't do it after volume squatting or volume deadlifting. However, if you had just done some sort of max effort work, or you're doing up to triples, or even at most 5 reps, if you had built up to peak 5 rep sets, or you had just done some sort of dynamic effort training, right? Particularly dynamic effort training, which again, most athletes are going to rotate through stuff like that. Like serious field athletes, if you've got a good coach, is going to have you on some sort of program to where you do things like that. So you're probably going to be doing mixtures of max effort work, dynamic effort work, things like that. Oftentimes in current style training. So yeah, on whatever days you're doing either max effort or dynamic effort work, power related, not volume but power and speed, or just max strength, I think box jumps at the end of that workout are perfectly acceptable. They're not going to change your training stimulus tremendously. So that's when I would do them. When I would avoid doing them would be on the same days in which you're doing some sort of volume work, like 20 rep squat sets, or you're doing 3 sets of 10 on the squat, something like that. I think it's really going to be problematic. Your box depth jumps are going to interfere with that, because you're doing an extremely explosive movement after metabolic fatigue. It's going to interfere with your training. It's going to interfere with your recovery pattern. But doing it after dynamic effort work, max effort work is probably okay. Max strength work and dynamic effort work is probably an ideal time to do it. And of course, you can mess with it some on your off days, as long as you're not taking it to too much fatigue. All right, next question. How do you go about working in a strength program when it's required by your job to do PT 4 days a week that consists of running and bodyweight training? I'm right around the intermediate level of strength at this point, at 5'11", 180 pounds, 11 to 12% body fat. You know what, brother? You do this like with anything else. You monitor your body. You pay attention to your body. Most people do some sort of physical activity outside of their 3 or 4 days a week of lifting in the gym. That's normal. The only people who are the exceptions are these guys who come in and they train for hours 5 or 6 days a week. They may not have energy for other stuff, and they probably don't, which means they don't get well-rounded physical fitness. But, if you're training 4 days a week on some sort of intermediate program, it's perfectly fine. Even a 3 day a week, which you might be doing. So you do 4 days of PT, running If you're used to running and you're well conditioned to it, running should, particularly on your off days, should minimally affect your lifting. Now, all the body weight stuff might affect it to some extent, but you know what? You'll adapt over time. And like with anything else, what do you do when you're not recovering from the weight training due to the other outside activity? You deload. All right, because you do all this other activity, you might have to deload more often. Maybe before you were doing it, you might be deloading once every 8 weeks. Well, you might find that because of all this other activity with your job, you might have to deload every 4 or 6 weeks. You know what? So what? That means that you make 2 or 3 weeks less progress per year due to the extra deloads. That's it. Is that really going to be meaningful in the grand scheme of things? Not really. You know, your job and your career come first, and it sounds like if you've got a job that requires PT, this is a pretty serious, pretty strenuous job. That's got to take priority over your weight training in the gym. And like I said, yeah, you'll have to do a few extra deloads per year. But that's not a big deal. Who cares? So what? You miss 3 weeks of extra progress per year. Well, you're still getting 49 other weeks to where you're on the same schedule if you had been. And you know what? For some people, all that extra work that you're doing might not even interfere with your recovery. It's really going to depend on the person. For some people, it might just be active recovery at a certain point. When you get so strong and so fit that stuff you're doing for PT on your off days feels like it isn't even work, it probably isn't even hurting your recovery anymore. If anything, it might just turn into active recovery for you. And at the worst case, it's still making you more well-rounded in terms of your physical fitness. And that's never a bad thing, brother. Never a bad thing. You know, you're going to be all around better if you're great at running, body weight exercises, and lifting than if you're just good at lifting. So as simple as that. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.